All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our Clean Water webinar this month, How Road Salt Impacts Our Health and Infrastructure. I'm Sam Briggs, I'm the Clean Water Program Director at the Izaak Walton League, and today you'll be hearing from myself and Kira Carney, our Save Our Streams Coordinator, on some Saltwatch updates for the season, and then we're going to hand it over to Nicole Horvath and Jin Shin with WSSC Water, so they can make the connection for us between road salt and infrastructure and our drinking water. A few housekeeping things before I dive into the presentation. You should have a control panel for your GoToWebinar function. There you're going to be automatically muted, but you have a chat feature as well as a questions panel. We will be moderating the chat feature as well as the questions panel, so feel free to type your questions in there as you think of them, and we will address them at the end of each presentation. So feel free to type away. We will put relevant links in the chat for you all to access if we do reference a link or anything. And yeah, enjoy the presentation. So I'm going to get started here with a little bit of our Saltwatch overview in case we have some attendees that are unfamiliar with our Saltwatch program or just getting started. So this was a photo from late 2017. And this is a salt spill that happened right outside the Izaak Walton League headquarters in Gaithersburg, Maryland. This is Muddy Branch Road. And what you can't see here is that salt pile, that salt spill, is sitting right on top of a storm drain. So that was the impetus that began our Saltwatch program. We had a Clean Water fellow at the time, Scott, who went out there and was monitoring our stream for chemical parameters, and he was monitoring for chloride. And he saw our chloride levels go from about 30 parts per million to over 600 parts per million, basically overnight. And from there, we realized that this road salt issue is not something unique to Maryland or to Muddy Branch. It's something that people are experiencing all over the snow belt. And so from there, we launched our Saltwatch program to get more people engaged and educated about the issue. We send out Saltwatch kits for free to volunteers. They include 4 Hawk chloride test strips, which are in that bottle that you see on the screen. We send 4 of those per kit. There's sample testing instructions, data upload instructions, and a conversion chart for your test strips. We have about 5,000 of those kits available this year, and we have some partners who are building their own kits as well. So you can request your free Saltwatch kit at saltwatch.org. If for some reason you would want to monitor more, or you're monitoring a bunch of different streams and you want more test kits, let us know and we can send you more strips for you to go ahead and gather data all winter long and beyond. So the goal of Winter Saltwatch is to raise awareness in the general public about the connection between salt and stream health, to identify chloride hotspots in fresh water, to advocate for smarter salt application of road salt by sharing results with private landowners and local and state agencies. We found at the beginning of this program that one of the biggest issues with road salt pollution is that the general public didn't necessarily understand the impact on water quality and drinking water. So that was our biggest task to start out with, is educating folks about the impacts of road salt and how to more effectively use salt in a smarter way. So here's an example of a really perfect Saltwatch submission to us. We have folks submit their data through Water Reporter, which is an app that you can get on your phone, or if you do not have a smartphone, you can use your desktop computer as well. And this person took a picture of their test strip on their conversion chart. The conversion chart is important because each test bottle has a different lot and the conversions might be different. So we need to know what lot you had for your Saltwatch kit. It has the location, the watershed. They tagged us as the organization, so we make sure to see the result come in, and they have a little bit more information about when they took the test, when the road was treated, around the bridge where it was, and just a little information in case the pin got put in the wrong spot. So we encourage folks, if you're going to use just one test strip, to monitor before a winter storm to get a baseline reading, after salt has been applied to roads, after the first warm day or rainstorm following a snow or a freeze, and after the next rain event. If you have not requested a kit yet, and there's already been snow on the ground or the roads have already been treated, that's fine. Feel free to still request a kit. We would like to see more data, even if you didn't get a baseline reading before the snow. Also, if you're from the DC metro region, you may notice that we get a lot of freeze and thaw events and a lot of rain, and that's part of the challenge of this region with the road salt, is that we do freeze and thaw so consistently throughout the winter. So you may want to request more test strips to get more snow events under your belt. So here's an example of a before and after a snow event with Saltwatch readings. The first one, these are both in Cabin John Creek, Maryland, at the same site. First one was last year in January before a snow event, a good baseline reading. It was a little bit elevated at 123 parts per million. But then after a 2-day winter storm at the beginning of February, we saw that chloride reading get off the charts. It maxed out that test strip at over 610 parts per million. So a really drastic cause and effect with the road salt that's applied for this stream in Maryland. Here's another good example. This is in 4 Mile Run in Virginia. They took a sample and it maxed out the test strip at over 610 parts per million again. This volunteer actually went out and purchased high range chloride test strips at 280. And so he did the sample again and saw that it was at 2,897 parts per million. So really, really high chloride readings for this. Jonathan just asked, do the kits expire? They do expire. So make sure that on your test, on your conversion chart, there should be a little date in the center that's the expiration date. So if you have a kit that's a couple years old, it's likely expired, you can request another one. That's also something that we quality assure for. When you submit your test strip on the conversion chart, we double check to make sure that strip is not expired. Usually the strips are good for a couple years when we order them. So here's our results from 2018 to 2021 across the country. You can see we get most of our engagement in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic, and we're starting to see some more data trickle in the Northeast. A lot of green dots because we're getting a lot of data before and after winter as well, but also a lot of red and yellow dots. So it's a problem across the country. So this is last year's results, and I like showing this slide because it's encompassing a full winter season, so we can really see how the winter impacts our waterways. Across the country, 27% of the Saltwatch readings we got were toxic, so over 230 parts per million. In the DC metro region, 46% of the results we got were toxic. Clearly, the fact that we have a freeze-thaw pattern for our weather, as well as aggressive oversalting in the region, we're seeing a lot of impact on our waterways. All of these results can be found at saltwatch.org. If you click on the results tab, you can see past year's results as well as this year's map and manipulate it for yourself too. Here's an example of one stream. This is at Malcolm King Park, right across the street from the league headquarters in Gaithersburg. And this is data from December of 2020 through October of 2021. And I like to show this because, first of all, in January and February of 2021, you can see that those test strips were really maxed out at 610 parts per million for a few days. And then the really concerning part about this is that those salt levels stayed elevated at around 200 parts per million all year long. So this is a systemic problem that is clearly the chloride is lingering in our waterways and can pose issues down the road. It's also a concern because during the summer months, when the flow is lower and the temperatures are hotter, the critters in our stream, the fish and the macroinvertebrates, are more drastically affected by the chloride. And so if we're seeing it elevated in the summer, that's a concern. Here's the 2018 to 2021 DMV Saltwatch results with the streams on the map there. So you can see we're getting a lot of engagement in the region. And it's great to see, but it's also really diagnosing a huge problem for road salt pollution. All right, so I'm gonna show off this year's results for a few distinct regions across the country. Let's see, someone just asked before I do this, why are critters more affected in the summer? And that's because they're already stressed out because the smaller streams and tributaries are a lot higher temperatures, especially when you are in an area that has a lot of impervious surface and a lack of forested area. And so the fact that they're already stressed out with those high temps, if you add chloride on top of it, it's kind of a double whammy for them. So that's why they're more affected in the summer. They're still affected in the winter, especially because we're seeing salt levels get super, super high. But the fact that the salt is lingering for the summer is really concerning. All right, so here's our results so far for DC metro region. One thing I like to point out is that it looks like we have a ton of red dots in like the Gaithersburg area under Germantown and next to Aspen Hill. We do have a ton of red dots, but we also just have more people monitoring in the region, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on in the presentation. So it doesn't necessarily mean that Gaithersburg is worse than other regions in the DC metro area. It's just that we have more data to show that it's a problem. So we're hoping to fill in gaps so we can see results across the region and diagnose the problems and see hotspots there and then can act on it. This is the Philadelphia region. So far, they're mostly staying in the yellow dots. There's some few reds peeking in over 230 parts per million, but we do have a ton of engagement. You can see north of the city and in the Ardmore area. New this year, we have groups in Connecticut that are engaged, and they're doing a great job getting a lot of coverage across the state. So far, their results are staying pretty green, but we're about to do another upload of data, and I expect to see a little more red creeping in there. This is the Twin Cities area. We have a lot of engaged monitors there. And interesting, in the Twin Cities, we have some groups that also are monitoring roadside ditches as well, where the concentrations are really, really high. So I encourage you all to go to our results page, click around on this map, because you can click on the individual dots and see what organization these folks are with, see the actual reading that they're getting, and you can see how high these results we get across the region. Wisconsin, we have some folks engaged in the Appleton area, Green Bay, as well as Stevens Point. Michigan, we have a Detroit area group, as well as a group on the west side of Michigan. And then one of the things we really like to do that we didn't necessarily do right at the beginning when we launched this program, because when we launched it, it was kind of a reaction to what we were seeing, and we didn't have all of our ducks in a row yet. But now we're building out all of these advocacy resources. So when you diagnose a problem in your stream, we give you the tools to do something about it. So we have some information on effective salting, flyers that you can use in your community. We have template letters to the editor if you want to write to your local news about the issue to shed some light on it. And then we have sample letters to your state legislator or city council so that you can try and work at the local level to reduce road salt impacts. We have some great volunteers who are actually gaining some traction on the issue as well. One of our Gaithersburg volunteers, he's with Muddy Branch Alliance, Carl Van Ness, got this opinion piece published in the Washington Post just this week. And he basically wrote a whole article about the true cost of road salt. And how it's a cost to infrastructure and public health, as well as wildlife. So that's a good read, and we like to see stuff like this get published. We also had our volunteer Jeffrey Selling in the Philadelphia area submit. He actually tried 4 times to get this letter to the editor published, and finally, persistence pays off. He did get this one published in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Conveniently, Jeffrey just asked me a question too. What is the turnaround time from our uploading data to Water Reporter and when it shows on the maps? There's been some concern from monitors in our area that there was a lag. So when they went to talk to the township officials, their data wasn't up yet. Great question, Jeffrey. We for sure upload once a week, And we've been aiming to do it twice a week. So we've been trying for an early in the week upload as well as a late in the week upload. I'm going to do another upload today. And so that'll get us caught up through Tuesday. And then I'll try to do one tomorrow as well that gets us caught up through the end of the week. So if you submitted your result to Water Reporter and you're not seeing it pop up in the map yet, and it's been longer than 5 or 6 days, shoot us an email so we make sure that we get your point captured. It's possible that it didn't pass quality assurance on our part, which is why it's not uploaded, and we can help you troubleshoot that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kira.
Awesome. Thanks, Sam. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, can hear you fine.
Yeah, so as Sam explained, the Saltwatch program has grown a lot since we started in 2018. The data set around the country is growing year to year, which is fantastic. One thing that we added this year in 2021 is our brand new Gaithersburg Winter Saltwatch program. So we received funding from the Chesapeake Bay Trust in partnership with the city of Gaithersburg to conduct a concentrated road salt awareness and data collection campaign in the city. So the city of Gaithersburg is doing a lot to address the road salt pollution. They're doing things like utilizing brine treatments, calibrating their trucks, training their staff on, effective salt application and stuff like that. So they're very supportive of our outreach and education efforts. Next slide. So one of the great initiatives the city did this year was the Paint the Plow program. And this was run by the Gaithersburg Parks, Arts, and Recreation Corporation, which is an organization that engages the community in a variety of initiatives. So they invited 2 youth centers, a senior center, and a staff from a Starbucks, a local Starbucks location, to paint the plows with salt reduction messaging. So this was a great program that really got the community involved, which helps get buy-in from community members, helps them get invested in the issue. But it also integrated art as a messaging tool in this community science project, which is always a great way to kind of engage people of diverse interests. So hopefully, this winter, those plows are turning heads and starting conversations throughout the city. Next slide. So some of the things that we're doing is we created a Gaithersburg Saltwatch Hub website where community members can go to request their kits. They can find events that are going on near them. There's information about where to report salt spills in the city of Gaithersburg. There's also a great map where you can actually look to see who's responsible for the management of certain streets. So whether that's city, county, state, or private, it helps you know who to have conversations with if you have concerns. And there's also the map of the kind of continuously updated data that's being collected throughout Gaithersburg. There's also those advocacy resources that Sam mentioned, and we have all of that great information in these brochures that we hand out at community events. Next slide. So some of the events that we've gone to are farmers markets on Thursdays and Saturdays in Gaithersburg. We also attended the Jingle Jubilee, which was a winter holiday festival for the community. It was a very family-friendly event. There was, Santa was there. There were some really great performances from community organizations. And events like these are a great opportunity for us to start those conversations with community members, raise awareness, and also hand out their free kits with their official Stay Fresh Gaithersburg fanny packs, which are a big hit. And another thing we're doing to engage the community is doing outreach to HOAs, schools, scout troops, things like that, to get people these resources, to hand out these kits, to get people to collect data. And starting in 2022, with our renewed grant, we're going to be focusing a lot of our outreach efforts on private businesses and private snow removal contractors. Next slide. So in Gaithersburg and beyond, we have a lot of amazing partners who help us engage communities in data collection. We're continually looking to expand across this region and throughout the country. So if you're interested in partnering with us, please let us know. Next slide. And then some of the things that you can do throughout your community is to request a kit, monitor, and submit your results to us. Like Sam said, each kit comes with 4 test strips to use throughout the winter, but if you want to kind of engage in a more consistent monitoring program, you can request those bottles from us as well. You can also start those conversations in your community by talking to your neighbors, local businesses, family, friends about the impact of too much salt. Another thing we recommend is not to be fooled by kind of the eco or pet-friendly packaging. There's actually no regulation around what can be put on packaging, whether or not it's accurate. So a lot of these products can have just as much, if not more, chlorides in them. So unfortunately, there is no magic bullet that we recommend that will solve this salt issue, which is why we're advocating for smarter and more efficient use of salt throughout the winters. You can also report oversalting. Most areas have a 311 report line that you can report non-emergency spills. You can also contact your local soil and water conservation district or another environmental agency in your area. Lastly, you can become a partner. Email us at saltwatch@iwla.org if you're interested. And next slide. So here's that information again. Check us out at saltwatch.org. You can email us with questions if you'd like to become a partner, and if you would like to request a bulk set of kits for your organization. With that, are we going to start with questions, or are we going to pass it over now?
We don't have any more questions that I didn't answer yet, so we can go ahead and turn it over.
Perfect. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicole and Jin from WSSC.
Great, thank you. While I get my presentation started, I can start with introducing myself. My name is Nicole Horvath. I'm the Environmental Outreach Coordinator for WSSC Water, and we are located in the DC suburbs, and I'll go more into what our service area is and who is considered our customers in our presentation, but I'd also like to introduce Jin Shin and let him share a little bit about his work with the water utility.
Hi everyone, my name is Jin Shin. I'm Water Quality Division Manager for WSSC. Me and my team, we do pretty much everything about water quality. So that includes all of the Safe Drinking Water Act compliance operations. And we have a team also to handle all of the customer complaints about water quality. And also, if something happens to water quality, say contamination events or spill events, we maintain preparedness to detect those events early enough to minimize the consequences. So that's what we do.
Great, thanks, Jin. So I'm going to go through, so who is WSSC Water? So you should be seeing a picture of our service area. We are, as I mentioned, in the DC suburbs. We cover Prince George's and Montgomery County, which are in Maryland. And you can see here kind of in the center of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And we serve about 1.9 million residents, and we've been around for over 100 years. So we came into existence in 1918, and we're one of the largest water and wastewater utilities in the country. So we do both water filtration, provide safe drinking water for our customers, and then clean the water after customers use it and put it back out into our bay's tributaries. So today we're going to talk to you all about and share about why a water utility cares about winter salting and what we've been doing about this challenge. So I'm go ahead to Jin.
All right, so what I'm going to do is to show you some water quality data, the changes in water quality that we have been seeing related to salt and how that has been impacting the way we operate. So obviously, when there's a snow event, people apply the salt on the road, and when the snow gets melted, it runs over to the waterway and make it into the water system. The bad news, unfortunately, is that the water utility and their treatment processes are not designed to treat salt. So conventional treatment system, water treatment system, does not have ability to control chloride and salt. So what you see when you measure chloride and salt in from our source water intake, that's pretty much what goes all the way to the customer tap. The other thing is that when the salt comes, it doesn't come alone. So what happens is that the higher salt content reacts with the chemicals on the soil. So it releases the organic matter and also the minerals that were previously on the soil surface and make it into groundwater and eventually into the water system. So that includes the manganese. If you have higher certain level of manganese in the water, that causes discolored water, and also organic matter releases into the water system too, and that increases the amount of chemicals that we have had in the water treatment process. And also, water is corrosive when the salt is high, so it impacts the any metal that it touches. So that includes iron and manganese. So it promotes corrosion of the iron pipes, which again causes the discoloration, and also potentially it can also increase the lead corrosion too. And that's exactly what happened in the city of Flint. So you're seeing the Patuxent, the chloride data from our Patuxent source water from the past 3 decades. 3 things to note here. One is notice the trend line increase. From 1990, the level was about 10, and it to 2020, it's about 30. So 3-fold increase in the overall trend line. And also, second thing is that notice how frequently and regularly the peaks are happening. That's annual the spikes and peaks coming from the road salt usually happens in the January, as early as January, peaks at February, and sometimes in March too. So that's a routine spikes that we are observing. And the third thing to notice is that not just the trend line increases, the height of the peaks are also increasing. So if you the first peak that you're seeing is from probably from 1980s and 1990s. It goes to about 35, but these days it goes all the way to 60. So the trend line increases and also the peak increases. Next one, please. And you're seeing the same graph from Potomac. 4 things to note: the same trend as Patuxent, trend line increases. We are also seeing from here about 3-fold increases in the averages, annual averages, and also the routine peaks in the snowmelt season. And the height of the peaks are increasing. The fourth thing that's different from Patuxent is that the height of the peaks are a lot higher than Patuxent. So back to Patuxent, the peaks, the recent peaks are about 60, but from Potomac it goes all the way to it's actually going through the chart. The highest peak that we saw so far is from 2015, and it goes all the way to 350 milligrams per liter chloride. So the magnitude of the peaks are a lot higher. And this is the difference that we are seeing from our Potomac intake and from the other utilities Potomac intakes too, because from the Fairfax water quality data and other Washington active water quality data, they are not seeing as high salt concentration as we are seeing. So their charts look more like a Patuxent chart. And the reason is that their source water, they have a source water reservoir or large and long pipes that acts like a buffer and dilution. So their salt impacts are a little bit more buffer than what we are seeing. But our intake, Potomac intake, is right at the shore of the Potomac River. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the Watts Branch impact. And the Watts Branch is a local tributary to Potomac River, and it originates from Gaithersburg, and it dumps about a mile above our intake. So what we are seeing, what's happening at the Watts Branch, we are seeing straight from our Potomac intake. Next slide, please. And this is the monthly averages showing the pattern, the annual pattern. So clearly, we are seeing the peak in February, which demonstrates that this is indeed coming from the salt, the road salt impact.
And Jen, can you just explain the difference? Because this says tap and the other ones were the raw water.
Right. So the other ones are raw water. Again, the treatment process does not handle chloride. So what you're seeing from source is the same as what you're seeing from the tap. So we kind of exchange between source and tap, but what you're seeing is probably the same same as what you're seeing from the raw water tap. Right, so this is our very simple schematic of our the water filtration process. It's mostly the big processes are the coagulation, flocculation, and filtration processes. They are mostly targeted to remove organics and particulate matter that makes the water cloudy. So those, again, these processes are not intended or designed to treat sodium and chloride. And to be able to treat those treat salt, you have to use ion exchange or reverse osmosis. So from small scale, your residences or dialysis centers, small water utilities, they can do it, but it's not something that we can do at a scale of WSSC. Right, next slide. So we've been seeing some impacts. The first notable impact is the increase in chloride, which causes the salty taste. What you're seeing is the if you can turn on the graph, the video, Nicole. So this is kind of time lapse graph of the customer complaints coming in from our system, and this is what happened in February last year. We started seeing the chloride peak on the 3rd of February at Potomac, and you can see how the level increases in the distribution system. So you first see it from our point of entry, and then as time goes along, day by day, it goes further out from our distribution point of entry to further out to the distribution system. And the level that we see, the level of chloride that we saw last year, it definitely exceeded the 250 threshold to be able to taste the chloride. So definitely customers noticed the water quality changes and started calling us. And within this short period of time, we received over 100 complaints about the salty taste. And this is the discolored water event that we saw in March 2015. What happened was that after the snow melted, and this happened to be the very unique year where there was a very frequent small snow event, and the amount of salt that was applied on the road, it was unusual. We had a conversation with the state highway, and they also acknowledged that the amount of salt in 2015 was very unusual, and which definitely showed water quality too. So in March, we started receiving complaints about discolored water. In March alone, we received about 1,000 discolored water complaints, and it sustained until the end of October. And what happened was that, like I explained earlier, the increased the salt content, it aggravated the corrosion of the iron pipes, which increased the iron-induced discolored water events, and it also promoted the release of manganese from the soil into water. So we had the manganese-induced the discolored water events. So, and at that time, we observed the record high chloride level, 330 from our source water. And for the full year, we received about 5,300 discolored water complaints. The reason that it sustained after the salt was gone, as I said, we continued receiving customer feedback until October, is that the manganese, once it entered our system, it sticks to the water main pipes and stays there even after the salt is gone and the manganese from the point of entry is gone, and it stays there. And whenever we make any hydraulic changes or there's a modest water chemistry changes, then it comes into the water and causes the discolor of water again. So it took some time for the manganese, the legacy manganese issue to subside. All right, the health impacts. Chloride itself is not a direct health impact, but it causes salty water taste. So EPA has a secondary maximum contaminant level at 250, and a secondary MCL is not for health hazards. It's for aesthetics such as color or taste. So it means that if you have higher than 250 ml milligrams per liter chloride, then you can actually taste the salty taste from the water. Sodium, on the other hand, has a health effect. It's still okay for general public, but if you are on a sodium extremely low sodium restricted diet, then the EPA health advisory is 20 milligrams per liter on a lifetime basis. So if you are seeing short-term spikes like 30 milligrams per liter, 50, 60, that's still okay, as long as you're not drinking water that's exceeding 20 milligrams per liter for your life. So we are not there, but the trend is increasing, and so and that's why we are concerned about the future where the baseline indeed exceeds this level. Ion corrosion, again, is an aesthetic issue. The secondary MCL is 0.3 milligrams per liter. Manganese, again, is an aesthetic issue. 0.05 is the secondary MCL. There's a renewed interest in the manganese health impact. Right now, the lifetime health advisory is 0.3 milligrams per liter, and 10-day exposure is 1 milligrams per liter. The levels that we are seeing, even with the heavy discolored water events, it's not even close to this. So what current situation is that it's not impacting the health. It's only aesthetic impact, but there may be some changes in the advisory levels in the future. And again, the lead corrosion is one of the potential problems, and that's exactly what happened in Flint. When there's a high salt content, the lead corrosion increases, and that's a textbook science. It's not manifested here in WSSC, and we think that the main reason is that we have a corrosion control treatment that's been very effective since 1992. So what it does is that we treat the water, we add corrosion inhibitor chemical to make the water less corrosive and somewhat protective against this kind of water quality changes. So so we think at this point we are okay, but maybe some years down the road, 10 years or 20 years, and we talked about this trend line increasing, there may be a point where the salt concentration, the increase in salt concentration may exceed the capacity of our salt corrosion control treatment. So that's why we are concerned about future and try to reverse and change the course of that trend. Impacts on the water treatment. Again, it causes the higher level of organics, which causes the higher amount, increase the amount of chemicals that we have to add. So we have to add more coagulant chemical, and we have to add more chlorine. It causes the taste and odor complaints. So again, it causes it triggers us to add more chemicals to prevent taste issue. Organics, increased organics, when it combines with the chlorine, it forms a chemical called a cancer-causing chemical called disinfection byproducts. So that's another concern too. So with these all these changes combined, March 2015, the discolored water event was our wake-up call. So we implemented additional treatment processes to be able to monitor chloride and also treat manganese when it comes in. So we started adding permanganate, potassium permanganate, and also prefiltered chlorine. And between those two, two additional treatment, the last year, the annual chemical cost just to treat manganese was about $800,000. So with all these changes, beginning March 2015, we felt that we need to do something to change what's happening in our watershed, what's coming to our drinking water sources. So we put together a process called Salt Summit, and knowing that there's already a very good and informative processes going on in the National Capital Region, there's a process and webinars and research efforts that's facilitated by Council of Governments and Potomac Partnership. So we didn't want to duplicate those efforts, but we wanted to have specific focus on what's happening in our watershed and what's impacting our drinking water. So we put together this we started this Salt Summit process and started talking with our our friends at MDE, State Highway, local county governments. And it's been very fruitful. So that said, I want to hand it over back to Nicole so she can talk about more details, because her office, Nicole and her office, did a lot of the heavy lifting, reaching out to public and change the awareness.
Thanks, Jin. Before we get into some of the outreach efforts, are there any questions that came up about like the treatment or the safety of the drinking water, just so we don't lose sight of those? Do you want to go? We can do a few of them before we get to the outreach stuff.
I was about to interrupt you for those.
Great.
So Lisa Bird said, do you know if the increased peaks are due to increased salt application amounts or due to residual biological impacts?
We are not aware of the residual biological impacts. Are you referring to the biological growth in our system?
I think so.
Yeah, so we are adding chlorine to suppress any kind of biological activity going on in our water distribution system. So with or without chloride, I think that's enough barrier for any kind of biological growth. So we are not seeing, and we monitor chlorine, the residual chlorine levels, and we monitor for bacteriological activity on a weekly basis. We have 88 monitoring locations throughout our system. We are not seeing any evidence that there's any change in our water quality, biological water quality. So that's a good news. We understand that there's always a potential, so we are looking closely, but at this point, we are not seeing any biological impacts.
Cool. Let's see. Jeffrey said he didn't get the connection of why high chloride levels require increased chlorine use. So can you explain that a little bit more, Jin?
Right. So it's not chloride itself. It's the organics that comes along with chloride. We found a relationship between the organics level in the source water that's coming in, along with chloride, and it's backed by the basic aquatic chemistry. When there's a high salt content in the groundwater or in the surface water in contact with the soil, then it helps releasing the organic matter that's bound to soil. So we are seeing both the elevated level of organics and also different kinds of organics coming in during the snowmelt season, and we believe that's causing the increased chlorine demand. Whenever there's a higher level of organics, there's a increased coagulant demand and increased chlorine demand. And the other thing that's notable is during the snowmelt season, we are seeing higher level of nitrogen combined organics, specifically amine groups or ammonia groups, and that has a very instantaneous reaction with the chlorine. So that's additional chlorine demand too.
Great. And then last question for now. Can you please reiterate how high chloride levels affect manganese levels?
It's the same thing. So same effect. Again, when chloride or sodium touches the sodium the soil, then there's a mineral. Manganese is one of them. That were previously bound to soil surface, and with a high salt concentration, the bond between manganese and soil becomes loose, and manganese comes loose into water, so it increases the manganese levels.
Great. And I just had one more pop in. Is there a correlation between high chloride levels and oxygen in solution in the waterways at a constant water temp?
We are not seeing that correlation. We should probably pay more attention to that. We are seeing at both Potomac and Patuxent, there is some degree of diurnal the dissolved oxygen fluctuations, and that's mostly because of the biological activity or algal activity in the source water. We are not seeing any change in that trend during the storm season, but we should probably look more into how the chloride impacts the oxygen content. It does not impact our treatment process that much. The level of dissolved oxygen that's coming into either Potomac and Patuxent is not in a way that we have to make any changes to treatment, but we're looking more into that.
Awesome. All right, take it away, Nicole.
Great, thank you. And those were all great questions. This is exactly why I wanted Jin to help me with this presentation, because I definitely can't talk about the science of all of this the way he can. So thank you, Jin, for helping out. So with the SALT Summit, one thing that we realized from all of our partner agencies was that this was a topic that everybody was talking about in their internal agencies and saw as a challenge across the region, which was great to hear because it meant that folks were open to continuing the conversation. There was also a conversation about the need for more data. So while like State Highway had their data about, how many lane miles they're salting and how much they're putting down, WSSC Water has our data at our intakes. We don't have conductivity gauges across all the tributaries that come into our reservoir or the Potomac River. And so that's just a gap in the data, which is where the Saltwatch program can help us out if we get more communities involved across our service area, just to see kind of when those spikes happen. We also realized that we need to focus on public perceptions. As was shown earlier in the DC metro area, we have a affinity for thinking we need to be outside driving when 5 inches of snow are down on the ground before it's been plowed, because we all have very, very important jobs apparently. And so folks just expect that there's gonna be clear roads right away, which means that more salt has been put down on the roads. And so we need to also focus on that public outreach of what's acceptable and what's important. So from the SALT Summit, there were 3 work groups that came out of that. Outreach work group, which is the work group that I oversee. And then we have a policy work group that's working together to look at local and state policies focused on road salt and salting practices. And then a technical work group, which was trying to get at that aspect of needing more data, or just kind of being in a place to be able to share each other's data in a safe space and to kind of look at trends to see if we can start working out any other connections. And those work groups just formed this year, so more to come about what's been found and what each work group does as we get through this winter and kind of regroup in April. Some other specific outreach that we're doing through a conversation with a partner nonprofit organization, we found out that one of our public school districts that we work with already had a road salt unit as part of their high school biology curriculum. So every student who took high school biology, which it's a required course, so every public school student takes that course, had in its fall semester a road salt unit. And what we did was we provided some real life data to help the students understand the issue. So instead of this being focused solely on the environment, we also let them see the impacts that we were seeing. The same charts you saw from Jin are the charts that we shared with the school districts, so students could learn to interpret that data and to think through what they're seeing and then come up with solutions. And they also are participating in some aspect of the Izaak Walton League Saltwatch program. So that would just started this year. Part of that unit was also providing training to their biology teachers. And most of that wasn't really about the salt issue, it was more about helping them better understand the work of a water utility so that they could help answer those questions and get their students to think about the connection between what happens on the land impacts the water, it impacts aquatic life, but it also impacts what becomes their drinking water. We also do a lot of public outreach. Like I said, thankfully, our partner agencies across our service area are really interested in this topic as well. So most recently, this picture is our general manager and CEO at a press release or a press event with our Montgomery County Executive and Department of Transportation. At our Potomac filtration plant, they were at the intake right on the Potomac River to talk about the challenges of salting on our river and our drinking water quality. And what was very serendipitous about all of this is that it occurred the day before the DC metro area got its first taste of winter weather this year. And so we had news crews out at 4:30 in the morning showing residents what proper salting looked like, showing the data, the challenges that we were seeing. So what we've noticed over the past few years, since we started talking about this in 2017, 2018, is a lot more interest from our local media sources to help get the word out. So before we felt like this was something that maybe only our academic community and our other local agencies were concerned about, but now we see a lot more media attention coming to these events, which is great because it helps get the word out to our customers and local businesses. We also, obviously, like everybody else, really rely on social media. So anytime that winter weather is being predicted in our region, our social media team puts out information about how our customers can be salt wise, reminders about how much salt to use on their sidewalks, and just kind of, again, drawing on the media frenzy that happens anytime we even are getting a flurry that hits our area. And so the steps that we share with our customers are the same that many of you have already heard, really encouraging people to not pre-treat with salt. And that's because, especially in this area, sometimes we never get the winter weather, or we might get a flurry or two. And so then there's a whole bunch of salt down for no reason. And we all know what happens to that salt anyway. So we're really trying to get folks to not put the salt down beforehand, reminding them to shovel first and often before salting. Reminding about the correct application and that, scattering the grains is the important part, not those big salt dumps that we all see on sidewalks and parking lots. And then reminding people to sweep up any salt that's remaining and that can be reused so that it doesn't end up down the storm drain and in our creeks once the rain comes or the snow melts. And then we've also been trying to remind folks to talk with their, especially if they live in an HOA, it's harder giving a municipality, but if they live in an HOA, talk with their winter weather team. So whatever company they use to do their plowing or snow removal, and just talk about best practices with them, sharing resources, letting them know what's expected, working on contract language if they're able to just make sure that they're salting in a smart way. And as I think Sam was sharing earlier, it's really just about best management practices, reducing our salt. We're not necessarily promoting uses of alternatives, just because we know that those alternatives are more expensive. But then also there's not enough research out there yet for us to feel confident to say that one alternative is better than another in terms of the potential impacts to our drinking water and our infrastructure. So just reducing our salt load as much as possible is where we are at with our messaging. So with that, that's the end of our presentation, but I'm going to stop sharing, but happy to take any other questions that may have come up.
Let's see. Jeffrey doesn't have a question, but he has a comment. He said, FYI, for those who don't live in HOAs, but in urban areas, many of us have local email networks, and many of us local salt watchers are putting out messages about limiting salt on local email. Lots of positive comments are coming from that. So that's great.
I agree with that one. I do the same thing on my community's Facebook page. People were like, oh, should we pre-treat with salt? I was like, no, please don't. And then I sent them a link to the resources for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments that told them not to. So, you know, I think that's always important to just not just say don't do this, but also share resources about why, so folks can understand the issue a bit more.
Exactly. Jeffrey also asked, should we salt watchers be testing our home drinking water as well as our creek sites? And so I have a response for that, Jeffrey. Right now, you're welcome to test your home drinking water if you're interested in seeing the results. However, we don't have the infrastructure set up for our data submission to be able to tell if it's drinking water compared to surface water, stream water yet. So I would advise you all to keep using your Saltwatch tests for streams, lakes, ponds, rivers, so that our messaging is clear of what the data is coming in. And then we're looking at building out our infrastructure potentially in the future. We've talked about this with potentially with nitrates as well out in the Midwest, because they have drinking water issues with nitrates. But for now, I don't want data coming in that's drinking water data without us being able to tell, and then us marketing that as if it's stream water results, if that makes sense.
And then can I just add to that, one, our water that we tell our customers, even though it might be a little bit saltier, it's still safe for them to drink. It's not something that is unsafe. So while there might be the challenges that Jen discussed in terms of the ions coming through, that really is just more like a large scale having to change our treatment practices and be mindful. Jin's team then knows, oh, we might see more discolored water complaints because X, Y, or Z just happened. But I do know that in some places, and I guess I should have prefaced this, that this is a public water system. So, right, these are people then getting their drinking water through pipes that are, you know, sending the water to their house. If you have a well, it's really important that you understand the issues and the water quality of your personal well, and that's something that you should look into if you live in an area close to a large highway or an area with a lot of salting.
Definitely, yeah. Colin Booth said one other place to test for chlorides would be home wells, which reflect local watersheds, and that's correct. So thankfully, we do have regulations that limit what goes into our public water system, so we can be assured that we're having safe drinking water. Let's see. Harry said random waterway testing seems to be a bit inefficient. Is there a strategy for selecting the most informative segments of waterways? So Harry, what we're trying to do is mostly educate the public about the issue of road salt pollution, and the best way to do that is to get people in the stream that they care about the most to then monitor for the impacts of road salt. There are monitors who are going out and doing tons of Saltwatch tests. They're either picking different streams segments and monitoring them consistently throughout the winter to see the impacts, or they're going to a stream spot that's like near an overpass or something where they know the road salt impact is going to be higher. So feel free to choose a stream site based on, you know, what you care about and where you think there might be a road salt impact of concern. Let's see. Allison said, I would love to get more information about the road salt unit. I'm working to develop resources for teachers in Wisconsin. We have a webinar today at 12:30 Central Time. Let's teach about salt that will introduce a couple lessons for K through 12 classrooms, but it would be great to be able to modify your unit for use in Wisconsin classrooms.
I'm gonna put in the chat, everyone sees, right? I can put our community outreach email address there, and then whoever's interested in that, I can't share the whole public school systems content for the unit, but I can share what we provided them, if that makes sense.
I think I can copy your chat so to make sure everybody can see it. So go ahead. Let's see. Someone was asking for a Saltwatch kit. We will make sure that that comes in. Have you done any targeted messaging to snowplow contractors for parking lots? Jane, we have some resources on our Saltwatch website about that. And then this next Gaithersburg grant, we're going to be targeting those contractors and businesses. So we're going to be building out that infrastructure for Gaithersburg, which then can be adapted for, nationally. And Nicole, I don't know if you wanted to respond to that one.
As a public water utility, that's not really our role, but part of the Salt Summit Outreach Work Group is representatives from Maryland Department of the Environment, and they are working on a salt applicator certification program. So they will really be the ones we see ourselves as just kind of being a resource to help provide the data about what the challenges are, and then rely on our other agencies that have jurisdiction in different areas to really do that type of education and outreach.
Awesome. And then Allison Madison from Wisconsin Saltwise is putting the link, or I put the link for where you can access her webinar if folks are interested in going to check that out. Lots of awesome road salt resources happening across the country. So please keep us in the loop. Jeffrey just asked, I see a question box and a place for answers, but I don't see a chat box on this platform. You should also have a chat, Jeffrey, that is part of that kind of control panel. So folks, if you are having issues accessing the links that I'm putting into the chat box, feel free to shoot us an email. I'm going to go ahead and copy over the chat to my notes so that I make sure that we retain it, and then I can send it to you via email. So let's see, I'm making sure I do that before I'm clicking in. I don't think I have any other questions in here. Joy says, awesome presentation. Thank you, Jen and Nicole, and I agree. And then we'll also put links. We're gonna go ahead and save this recording on YouTube so you can watch it again. And we'll put the links in the description as well, so you all have access to it. So that will be up by tomorrow on our YouTube. So stay tuned for that. And with that, if there's no more questions, which I don't see any new ones, I'm going to go ahead and say thank you to Jen and Nicole for presenting on behalf of WSSC. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. It looks like we had over 70 attendees, which is great. And more folks will be able to access this via our YouTube channel. So thank you, everyone. Happy Thursday. And thank you for salt watching as well. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thanks all.